Hello and welcome back to TriTech's instructional video on configuring your PCR to billing NEMSIS Import. This is part 2 of the instructional video series and will cover build out and configuration of location and payer codes. If you're looking for configuration and instructions on agency, staff, units, or call sign codes, please refer to part 1 in the video series. Also, please have the attachment of the instructions that you received in your welcome email open and go to page 5, where we'll begin with location codes. Now, the main thing to understand when preparing location codes for the import is that the required fields are going to vary greatly on the version of NEMSIS file that you're currently using. Now, we will begin with requirements and a build out of a NEMSIS 3 location. Now, I'll be using location that's filled out with that exists but partially incomplete, and I'll populate the location ID. And now we get to the first data element that NEMSIS 3 file will look at, and that is the description. It will look at first 30 characters of the description, and it is space and punctuation sensitive, but capitalization does not matter. So TriTech Software Systems in our case is the description. We then move on, and the next data element is address line 1. Now, just like with the description above, this is also space and punctuation sensitive, and capitalization does not matter. Address line 2 is totally optional. If there's a PO box that you know exists or any other notes that you wish to save under this specific location, you may enter that address line 2 and it will not affect your import. And last but not least is the zip code of this city. So I will search for my city and have it populated. One last thing is what type of location. Drop off, pick up, okay? And at this point, you have populated all the required information for a NEMSIS 3 type import. Once again, description, address line 1, and zip that will automatically populate your city. Those 3 fields is the data element that will have to exactly match what is coming over from PCR. It is space and punctuation sensitive, and capitalization does not matter. Now next we're going to move on and talk about what a location for a NEMSIS 2 import looks like. Now you will do the same thing by building them out by entering an ID along with a description, only in this case description is not something that it will match on. You will then go down and select what type of location it is. In our case we already have drop off, pick up. You may enter address, city, state, zip if you know it, if it's available, but again it's not a requirement. We then move on to the Modifiers tab. Here is one of the 2 data elements that a NEMSIS 2 location is going to match on. So the modifier that you will select, that is completely optional, and then the facility ID. That's one of the data the first data element that the import will match on. So I will use a generic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but in your case you will be using the state issued ID, facility ID for that location. Once that's done, you move over to a NEMSIS tab, select the location name. This is not something that the import will match on, so I'll just use abbreviation for TriTech Software System, and enter the same ID as I did for the Modifiers tab. Again, this is the facility station number, but this is the actual ID that's issued for that facility by the state. Now these 2 fields, facility ID and the NEMSIS and the facility station number under the NEMSIS tab, are the 2 main data elements that a NEMSIS 2 file will match on. Okay? If you have any questions in regards to the build out of locations and the requirements and the versions that you're currently using, don't hesitate to give us a call. Also, refer to the document as I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the video. That video has specific screenshots of highlighted data that's required for each version, version 3 and version 2. Okay? With that, we're going to move on to our last code, and that being the payer codes. Now, this will, from a build-out perspective and configuration, this will probably be the least amount of work that you have to do. However, it is very important. And we say that because majority of your payers already exist. However, one thing to keep in mind is that if the import is not on the same page and not configured properly, every time a crew member enters a facility, or sorry, a payer that does not exist in billing, it will create a new payer each and every single time. So one of the two decisions will have to be made. You either have the crew not select a payer in PCR, which a lot of customers choose to do, or you will have to get the softwares on the same page. You will either have to limit down the list of available payers that the crew has to select from and have an exact match to the payers in billing, or risk a new payer being created every time a mistake or a misprint or a wrong payer is selected. Now, with that in mind, if you do choose to proceed and build out payers, I will go over the requirements next. So payer ID, again, something that's just for billing and it is totally optional. First, it will look at, again, first 30 characters of the description, and just like with the previous data, that's something that's space and punctuation sensitive, but not case sensitive. Now again, as I mentioned, most of these already exist in your system, so you will just have to adjust to get them to match, and then you move down to the billing description here. This also has to match. Word for word, first 30 characters, punctuation, space. Address line 1, just like with location, is another data element that has to match for the import to be successful, along with, as we previously saw, zip code, city, and state. Now once you populate either zip or city, it'll populate the rest of the information. But all of these fields that I just went over are the requirements to have a successfully populated payer. And the last thing, I will mention it once again because it is very important, if the both softwares are not on the same page and there's an import file that's coming over with a payer that currently does not exist in billing, a new payer will be created with that information. Okay? So that's going to conclude the portion of the codes and the build out. Once you have all of the codes that have been covered in video 1 and video 2 completed, please make sure to have at least one import file available and let your education rep know so we may proceed. We will test the import, we will look at the data and how it's matching, and we will cover the educational portion of it. Again, as I mentioned before, if at any point you have any problems, concerns, questions, don't hesitate to pause the video, contact your education rep, whether it's direct or email, or just call TriTech support at 1-800-987-0911, option 5. Once again, my name is Nick. Thank you for sticking with us and with me through all the instructions, and have a pleasant day.